My name is Erin Daly, and on behalf of Everbridge, I'm excited to present this Expert Insights webinar, When the Lights Go Out, Managing Communication During Disruptive Events. In this webinar, our presenters will examine how Northeast Utilities manages disruptive events and critical communications best practices. After the session, we will have a 15-minute Q&A session with our speakers. Now I'd like to introduce you to our speakers. Dr. Ed Goldberg, MBA, BSEE, CBCP, manages Northeast Utilities Business Continuity and Disaster Recovery Programs in Berlin, Connecticut. Ed served 10 years as IT manager at Millstone Nuclear Power Station. He is a CBCP with 25-plus years IT and management experience. He served 4 terms as president of the Connecticut ACP and is a popular conference speaker and published author. He is currently in his 2nd term as Education Director for the ACP Corporate Board. Ed has a BSEE and MBA, an Advanced Graduate Certificate in Computer Communications Networks, and a doctorate in Management and Organizational Leadership. He became a professional engineer in 1986 and an amateur radio operator in 1976. Ed also serves as a core faculty at Capella University. He mentors PhD learners and teaches and develops coursework. Ed taught MBA and IT coursework at Albertus Magnus College for 11 years. He has firsthand experience designing military computer systems, fire alarm control panels, web offset printing press accessories, and electrofinishing plating computerized controls. He has a patent for sub-ambient fluid circulation systems used in the printing industry. After Ed's presentation, we'll be hearing from Claudia Dent, Vice President of Product Management at Everbridge. Claudia has many years of experience in the technology industry and has held executive positions in product management, marketing, business development, and general management at companies ranging from startup to large global enterprises. We are excited and honored to have both of our speakers with us today. And now I'd like to turn it over to our first presenter, Dr. Ed Goldberg. Dr. Goldberg, you may begin.
Thank you very much for the great introduction, and we're all out of time. Not really. But I appreciate the kind words. And great to be here, and I'm glad you got us all together for this. So let's see if this works. There we go. No, it went backwards, didn't it? We're going backwards. Okay. There we go. Well, we're going to talk about pretty much what we do here at Northeast Utilities with our Everbridge system. To a great extent, this was something new for NU back in, I want to say it was 2007 when we started with it. It was something that we hadn't had anything of an external nature prior to them, and this has it's worked out well. And I'm going to tell you some of the things we've learned, some of the ways we've used it, and some of the ways we plan to use it in the future. Hopefully that'll be helpful. Maybe it'll help a little bit quickly to tell you a little bit about Northeast Utilities, which is in the utility business is sort of a holding company. Underneath Northeast Utilities, there are several companies: Connecticut Light and Power, Public Service in New Hampshire, NSTAR, Yankee Gas, Western Mass Electric, and then there's transmission systems. And NSTAR also has a gas component and an electric component within it. We've got about 3.2 million electric customers in the 3 states and 350,000 gas customers in 2 states. And then we operate much of the transmission system across the 3 states. And transmission, for those of you that aren't aware of all the terms, as opposed to distribution. Transmission are the big wires, those big towers that you see that run kind of long distances. So just a quick overview of what we're going to talk about. We're going to look at what we consider to be typical of a utility's use of Everbridge or any such system, how we enroll people, how we control the system, how we organize the groups and the plans that we have, how we maintain the system and those plans, who owns the groups, what do we do when employees leave, and so forth, how we manage all of that. Our use of the system during what's been a busy couple of years. We've had what would be termed 3 500-year storms in the last 14 or maybe it's close to 2 years now, months, since 2011. 2011, Hurricane Irene came at the very end of August, I believe it was, and it was the first major hurricane to hit this area since 1985 when Gloria hit. And so we knew it would be bad just because the trees had 25 years to grow unabated. And that doesn't mean we weren't doing tree trimming. We trim trees along rights-of-way and so forth, but rights-of-way aren't very big, and the trees are. And when they fall down, they may start out outside of the right-of-way and end up in the right-of-way, meaning they take down the wires. So that was a lot of damage. And then I think it was 7 or 8 weeks later, it was Winter Storm Alfred, which was we call Snowtober, or any of a number of nicknames for this pretty horrible event. Basically, we had a surprise heavy wet snowfall in October, which for this part of the country is extremely rare, unprecedented. And the leaves are still on the trees, and so that caused the trees to get weighted down with heavy wet snow. Pretty much every tree broke, if you can picture such a thing, and the amount of damage was amazing. And then we had a blizzard earlier this year. In between, we had routine use of the system and occasional storms here and there, but nothing like those. Those were just incredible. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about the routine use. We'll talk about some plans we have for future use, wrapping it around incident management, our customer communication, and so forth. So I'll actually talk about how to get some or all of your electricity for free. I just gave you the overview of NU, and I'll also give you a quick overview of the Association of Contingency Planners, who's kind of co-sponsoring this with Everbridge. We've partnered with them, and we'll be doing some work together in the future as well. Routine use that we hardly ever have a month that goes by where the weather is perfect. This isn't like San Diego or perhaps Las Vegas or Phoenix, where there are months where the weather doesn't change. It's pretty predictable, and it's New England, and it's not so much so. It doesn't mean that we don't have good weather. We have plenty of it, but during the summer we have thunderstorms that roll through now and then, and during the spring you've got late winter storms like ice or snow. Winter, obviously, we can have blizzards, and then in the fall we can have hurricanes. And then what's been happening the last few years is these occurrences have been getting worse, but they've been jumping around sort of out of season, where you get things that are unusual, like tornadoes, not in what you would consider a tornado-prone area, and happening with unfortunate regularity. So things have changed. They're changing even more as time goes on. But routine for utility is dealing with those things. So the routine use that I'm going to talk about may not seem routine to others. So sometimes we have to staff up our call center if we think we're going to have a busy day or night or weekend or whatever. And we use this system particularly effectively for staffing out of an on-call rotation or out of a general staffing requirement for the call center. So we operate our own call centers in 3 states, and as you might guess, when the lights go out, there's a lot more calls to those places, and they've got to bring in people to do that. And the staffing of that is quite challenging, as you might guess. So we use the Everbridge system to call people out. They have lists. They manage the lists. They're within work groups and so forth. And the nice thing that we try to do, and I'll talk to this in a little bit, is to the extent possible, distributed control, meaning we're able to show other people how to use it, because it is pretty easy to use. It's web-based and so forth, and they can take care of their own group. And we don't have to hire people that this is their only job, is to manage all these work groups. So they're able to enroll their employees and move them around as needed, and it works out great. And they know how to use it, and to be honest, it goes on without us really knowing much about it unless something goes wrong, which at least it's been a long time. There's nothing wood here to knock on, but basically it's been pretty reliable in that regard. That part of it just really is rock solid. And we don't have any issues that way. We push information to employees from time to time, especially in advance of storms. That's most of the time what we're using it for. Readiness checks, we do that quarterly. Anomaly resolution. So from IT, information technology, is the best example I can come up with. The hardware in the data centers will actually initiate trouble tickets within our internal systems when a hard drive fails, or there's some memory issues, or there's some, overload condition where, perhaps getting high on usage and they need to look at capacity planning and so forth. Whatever the reason, there's a number of things that come out of servers and so forth, and we shoot those out through paging system, but we also have the use of Everbridge to back it up as far as phone numbers, email addresses, and other ways, text messages and so forth, to get a hold of folks. But that's used within IT. So it's used in the call centers, used in IT. And then we use it generally across the company for condition updates, weather, and so forth, which we do a lot of because we watch storms closely because we know how they could affect our service territory. We do quite a bit of things ourselves, especially because it's an older utility and we have a pretty highly populated service territory that's densely populated, even going back decades. So it's not like a newly developed area with a new infrastructure. It's an old infrastructure in terms of the electric system, but along with that came a robust infrastructure for communications. And as an example, in the old days, you could buy, I think you still can perhaps, you could buy paging services and give all of your employees pagers who need them. And we bought pagers and built our own paging system long, long ago and used the paging system very effectively for many years. And the connections that are needed come across our own rights-of-way. So we ran fiber where the transmission towers were, for example, and we were able to get really good coverage. And in fact, if there were dead spots over the years, they would just put up another site and cover that dead spot. So we had pretty flawless coverage across our service territory. We still have that. We still have that paging system. People don't carry the pagers much anymore, so now we rely on others' infrastructure like commercial carriers and so forth. But we still have that capability, and we also use it for our own radio system, which is what's in most of the trucks. The utility trucks all have radios in them, and they rely on that for communications. So that's a primary tie, and it's very reliable. We rely on it, but we also know it's not infallible, and it could go down. And we host that system internally, and it's really good to have a system that's hosted somewhere else. And that's where we came about, meeting with vendors and choosing Everbridge about 8 years ago at this point. And, never look back. We just found that now we can use this for other purposes as well that the paging system and the radio system aren't able to do. It's obviously much more flexible in terms of ways to communicate. The advantages that we found is the mobility. We can send messages from anywhere, anytime. Doesn't matter what the status of the systems are at Northeast Utilities. We know that if we can get on the phone or onto the web or into the office or any of a number of other ways to get access, we can get into Everbridge and we can make notifications as needed. The other piece we're looking at now, we've been working with Everbridge for about a year now on tying to other users. I think it's called Everbridge Network, but they'll correct me afterwards if I'm wrong. But the basic tenet is, here in Connecticut, it's perhaps coincidence or whatever, but the state of Connecticut uses Everbridge. A lot of the towns use Everbridge. We use Everbridge, and the ability to tie those things together may come in handy in the future. And I say time together, there's controls in place and so forth, but it would expedite the flow of information between these entities, government to us and vice versa. When there are big outages, we work very closely with the Department of Emergency Management here and DHS and the local towns, departments of public works and their emergency management directors and so forth. And this is a great tool to facilitate that. And the last point is that this type of communication system, it's not our core business. We're an energy company, and distribution, transmission of electricity and gas, that's it. And so having to take care of all this other stuff is more of a burden than we need, and we're not as good at it as someone who does it for a living. So what's a major event for a utility? Obviously a blackout back in August of 2003 or 4, I think it was, and well, we'll get to that. I have a slide that sort of shows that. We've had hurricanes. Hurricane Isaac comes to mind. Credit for the graphic goes to someone else, so I don't know who it is. there was this was August 14, 2003. You may recall the Great Northeast Blackout. This is really not what happened, obviously. We're just having some fun here. This is actually, it wasn't so much fun, and this actually did happen. We lost one truck. There was a sinkhole. Sinkholes are not common in the Northeast. I think they're caused usually by water main breaks and things of that nature. And so it was a bad day for somebody. But flooding and things of that nature, for the most part, we don't lose trucks very often, fortunately. And fortunately, nobody was hurt when this happened. These are actual messages. I just wanted to throw these in to show, as an example, some of the things we've used the system for. You know, I can tell stories all day of how we've used it, but back in July of 2012, I don't even remember what the event was, if it was a line of thunderstorms coming through, possible impending storms on July 4th, all town liaisons are in standby. Town liaisons in our organization are people that we place in every town's emergency operations center to serve as a connection between the utility and them to facilitate the flow of information, which is pretty important, almost as important as the flow of electricity. So that's really what that's about. The next one down, we had one day some service work done on batteries in the UPS in our data center, and as you can see, it didn't go well. The battery changeout was in process. Something went wrong. I think something shorted out or whatever, made a big puff of smoke. The smoke initiated an alarm. In a data center, when there's smoke, there are fire suppression systems. So the system armed. Basically, it flowed water into sprinklers, but the sprinklers didn't release the water. But now you've got the headers all charged, and so they aborted the discharge of the suppression system. They stopped the sprinklers from firing, but at the same time, the system also turned off power to the data center because it thought there was a fire. So that's a bad day, right, in case you use a computer at work, which most of us do. So facilities had to bring in a vendor to drain the system, restore the pan. So long story short, this was just an event that wasn't a storm, and it didn't cause an outage. We instituted our incident response plan, brought in our incident response team, and these types of messages were going out quite regularly during that morning. The whole thing was over in a matter of hours, but that's the way we kept everyone informed, and it worked extraordinarily well. And then Hurricane Sandy. Now we've got people scattered all over the region. Connecticut wasn't as hard hit as New Jersey, but along the shoreline in Connecticut, it was very bad. Well, a lot of people lost their homes to the storm, and further down Fairfield County, which is southwestern Connecticut, lots more damage than southeastern Connecticut. And we were able to direct resources. The first thing you do when a storm like that's coming, and we had a lot of notice for Sandy, they predicted it very accurately and very, very many days out, is you reposition your resources so they're safe. So while you may have area work centers with trucks and crews down along the shoreline, you move them inland until the storm passes, and then you move them down. Well, while we're moving people around, we're moving employees around too. And if they close the roads, we need to get that information to folks. A lot of people were without power, were without phones, were without cell coverage or any combination of those things. But using the system was very effective in getting this word to almost everybody within the company. And we did it many times. So this was just one of many messages. Hopefully that's helpful. All kinds of weather events hit us, and we use the system throughout. You've got all sorts of down wires and damage from Sandy on the bottom right. And the bottom left was the blizzard that hit back in February of this year. That's typical of the type of damage you see. So if you look, by the way, at where the power lines are and the right-of-way, there are no trees right around it, but they're 8 or 15 or whatever number of feet away from it. Obviously, the trees that fall are much bigger than that, so you can't cut them all. You can't cut back that far. And so that's the type of thing that happens. Up above is just a picture of a flood that damaged some power lines, and I don't even think it's in this country. I don't know where that picture's from. Non-weather events. So yesterday was one of the first days that there was some black ice around New England, and there were a rash of accidents. This isn't from yesterday. This is from another incident last winter, but these are the types of car versus pole accidents that are very common. Yesterday morning there were, I want to say there were about a dozen of them in Connecticut. It might be somewhere, more or less than that, but listening to the traffic reports, that was a predominant theme, was that people were, first time out, first time it's been cold enough and conditions right to make some ice and make the road slippery, and that's the type of thing that happens. You'll also hear a lot of times from utilities, and people joke about it, about this phantom squirrel that causes power outages. And the one on the bottom right, that's a real squirrel on real wires, and those are communication wires. The power lines are behind him and up above him, but they don't, they're indiscriminate. They don't really know the difference, and they'll just go for a warm place. And usually the warm places are transformers, switchgear, capacitor banks, things like that are mounted up on the poles. And so they'll crawl into these things, and oftentimes when they crawl in, there's live conductors in there, and they're in close proximity to each other. You have to be able to somehow bridge between two conductors to cause current to flow, which is why they can walk on one wire and not get hurt. But if they somehow touch two of them at the same time, then they're history. Squirrels and other animals make really, really good conductors for a very short period of time. So they'll usually cause an outage, and sometimes it'll reset itself, and sometimes it won't. It depends on how it ended. And the picture up on the right, it's just one of those internet things that I just couldn't resist including, because despite the fact that was a horrible tragedy a long time ago, the little squirrel in the front just entertained the heck out of me. So hopefully it does for you as well. How we organize. The plans are, our business continuity and disaster recovery plans are organized by business process. So we have work groups that are assigned to business processes, and so we typically choose a work group that has some business process, that has some sense of criticality, urgency, time sensitivity to it, and they need a business continuity plan. And out of that business continuity plan will flow things like, what IT do you need? And that's the DR plan. And once we have those things together, we now need a way for those people who own those plans to communicate with their folks as needed. And that's where this system and their groups come into play. So we've set up groups by business continuity plan. Each business continuity plan has an Everbridge group, and that group has an owner, and it's usually the owner of the business continuity plan, maybe an administrator, somebody else who could do it as well. And they support whatever business process is needed. And there's a sequencing to it that is included in the plan. It relates to the recovery time objectives and so forth. Our incident response teams of a much higher nature, say company, either company level or even at the Northeast Utilities holding company level, we may have incident response teams depending on what type of an incident has occurred. So managing a fire would probably be a small incident response team of a local nature, and they would communicate as needed. And again, organized along the same way as the plans, the Everbridge group supports calling up the incident response or telling people where they have to go to meet or whatever. So it's organized along business continuity plans, disaster recovery plans, incident response teams, and then it's also organized by department, work groups, whoever might need it. Even if they need it for a non-emergency purpose on a daily basis, we encourage that. One of the reasons we encourage routine use of the system is that it makes people used to getting those types of calls. Because the first time you get one, it's a little different than a normal call. It's a recorded voice, and it's, for some people, they get a little confused. And after you hear it once or twice, you recognize it. And you also have to sort of get people used to seeing the phone number that it's coming from, which in this case is our own main number, which they normally wouldn't get a call from. And emails come from an address within NU, even though it's coming from outside. So the system will flag it as an external email, but it's from inside. A lot of times people will see that and think that it's some kind of spam. And so we've trained folks, hey, this is what this really is, so they don't delete it. And by using it on a routine basis, they get accustomed to it. We also have groups that slice across locations, operating companies, and then a utility anyway, normal roles versus outage roles. So normal role for me, I'm a business continuity and disaster recovery program manager. I'm in the office most of the time. Most of the time, I'm in the office or in somebody else's office. But when an outage occurs, everybody that's in the office is out in the field. I may be a wires down guard, or I may be doing damage patrol, or serving as a liaison. So we're all over the place with that. We let people enroll themselves. We tell people it's part of your job, which it is. It's part of their offer of employment. Includes some sort of verbiage that tells them, you know, you have a storm responsibility and you need to be available when these bad things happen. And so we tell people we don't really care how we get a hold of you. You tell us how you want us to get a hold of you. And it works very well, because this way they can set it up to be the least intrusive sequence. Call my work phone first, then call my cell phone, then call my home phone, because when you call my home phone, you wake everybody up. So do that last. And whatever people want, it doesn't matter. Which emails, they can have multiple emails, lots of different ways to get a hold of them, but they own it. And it's a mutual respect kind of thing. We don't get into that. The only thing we will do, and I'll talk about that in a moment, we might change one item in the sequence, and there's a reason for that. So we educate people prior to enrollment. They know what it's going to look like, who it's coming from, what the consequences are of the priorities they choose, and the modes of contact, because the system is pretty robust, and it's going to get a hold of them one way or the other with all the different ways that it's given. So we want them to understand it, so that it works in their favor. This is a picture of a nuclear power plant control room. I'm familiar with it because I worked in nuclear for a number of years. This is nothing like what it takes to control the Everbridge system. It's a very, very simple web-based couple push buttons, where to write your message, who it goes to, pull down menus and so forth. Very friendly, not at all like what you see on the right. Obviously, that there's a lot of old junk in there. That's the way nuclear plants look. They don't use web-based touch panels very much. They're starting to, but for the most part, they find that those old clunky controls are much more reliable than a computer. It's not reliable enough, which I live near a nuclear plant, so I'm glad of that. But we have central control and administration of the system. Myself and one other person works part-time on this for me, and basically we don't spend a lot of time taking care of it. It's adding people when they start with the company, and taking them out when they leave, and in between somebody has a request because they don't understand something or screwed something up, we can help them, but it doesn't happen much, and there isn't a whole lot to do. Setting up new groups, we would help them with that. There's restrictions on who can send any message. We don't want just anybody using the system, and we have restrictions on who can send what we call mass notifications. So if you want to send it out to 9,000 employees, you have to be in a communications group. You can't just do that. Not just anybody can do it. Possible future usage. We do some customer outreach now with some other systems that we use, and we may like to integrate that at some point. Geographic notification is something that's appealing to us. We're just not doing it yet. We just went through a merger, and they're still in the process of sort of taking inventory of what systems are available between the two companies and which ones we'll land on. If anybody's been through a merger, you know how that goes. It's disruptive, and it always takes more time than you expect. We're in that now. We're very, very active in terms of ties to state and other entities, be it directly or using things like social media with the general public. The folks that do communications here do a bang-up job, and they're really good at it. They use all of these things, and we know that within the Everbridge system, this capability that we haven't even scratched the surface of, and at this point, we may get into that in the future. Our own best practices is that self-enrollment, getting people to use it routinely, distributing control, educating people on how it works and re-educating them from time to time, limiting access to the distribution list. So again, not everybody can send it to everyone. And then coaching folks. When they send out a message, kind of going back afterwards and looking at the messages that were sent, who they were sent to, how they were sent, and get back to them and sort of do a, opportunities for improvement, lessons learned type thing in a very positive way. It really advances the cause a lot. we review the priority and choices for a contact. One of the things we do, I say there, beware all calls coming first to the work phone. Long time ago when we first started doing this, we lit the system off one day, so let's try it out. It'll be our first test. And immediately, there's 1,600 people at the main campus where I work here in Berlin, Connecticut, and there are about 200 phone lines. And Everbridge has, I don't know how many thousands of phone lines, but all 200 lines lit up, and there were no way that anybody could get a call in and out once we set the message off, because it was determined to deliver it, and it basically has nothing else to do. And so we had to throttle that a bit, which is a feature that was subsequently added, and pretty good feature. So we say we don't want to use all the lines. We want to, when you call Berlin, only use 120 lines at a time, and it works great. So, you know, those kinds of things can be overcome, but that's why you test. And so we don't let people all put the work phone first. We encourage them to put that second or third if they can. We exercise the system regularly, not as regularly as I would like, but we do it. We include it in other exercises when we do tabletops and so forth. We try to make it part of that exercise, and we try to make it part of the culture so people really do get accustomed to it. I mentioned Association of Contingency Planners earlier. We do a monthly series of webinars that are educational for our members, and Everbridge was kind enough to connect with us and make this one available. We've pushed it out not just to Everbridge's mailing list, but also to ACP members as well. And you know, judging from the numbers, it was very successful. But hopefully this is working well. ACP is a great organization if you're into business continuity, disaster recovery, emergency management. I think there's a questionnaire that goes out after these webinars, and it'll include a, would you like more information about this? So good professional organization, great networking. Nobody competes on the basis of preparedness. So people share their best practices. So especially if you're just getting into it, but even if you're experienced and been in it for a while, it's a great way to bounce some of this stuff off of others. I know, at least internally, there's a very limited number of people that I work with that I can talk to about this, because it is a kind of an odd field for some, and going to people who have experience with it elsewhere is very helpful. I did mention that I would tell you how to get your electricity for free, and I made that up. I just wanted you to stay until the end of my presentation anyway. We're going to have questions at the end, but there is a way for you in the little dialog box to enter your questions, and they'll be collected. So with that, I'm going to turn this back to Erin. And that was the express version.
Great, thank you so much. I'll pass it over to Claudia then.
Hey, thanks, Ed. I really appreciate it. Unfortunately, I have no free electricity to give out. So
neither do I.
And I can't even begin to even promise such a thing. So what I did want to do is just spend a little bit of time talking about some of the best practices that we've learned over over many years of experience here at Everbridge. We've been in business for about 10 years now. So working with customers like Ed and many experts in the field, we've really started to understand some best practices that can help you manage some of these disruptive events. So, with anything, you want to have some kind of a preparation checklist before an event happens, one that you might know about, like, for example, Hurricane Sandy was obviously, predicted. And likewise, you want to have preparation checklists for things that, you're imagining could happen. So you want to be able to, try and be prepared for both the, imaginable and unimaginable as much as possible. So some of the things to consider are, really managing the entire life cycle of an event. What are the things that you're going to want to communicate before that event happens, during the event, and what are the important elements that need to be communicated, understood, post the event during that recovery process. And in fact, each critical events typically have a 6-part life cycle, which you can understand and delve into at a later time. You also want to confirm that for your key contacts, you have multiple paths to reach people. During many situations, some modes of communication are compromised. During Hurricane Sandy, for example, many landlines were very compromised, and they could not be used to communicate with people. Likewise, during the Boston Marathon, there was a period of time where mobile cellular communication was not possible at all during that crisis in the Boston area. So having these multiple modes to contact people is of critical importance. Message construction. There's a simple rule and best practice around constructing messages, and we call it the 3-3-30 rule. You want 3 ideas, 3 sentences, no more than 30 words. So those are things to take into account as well, ensuring that in an emergency situation, people don't get confused, that the messages that you send are very clear and concise. And don't forget social media, and I'll talk a little bit more about some examples of how that can be used in a few more slides. And then you really want to ensure that you test systems and procedures in advance. You want to make sure that when something does occur, that the users of your system are well practiced, so that they're very comfortable and can seamlessly execute any communication plans, leveraging templates, et cetera, that you've prepared in advance. Why it's important to have preparation and being able to be prepared so that you can actually understand and trigger different messages for different audiences based on the kind of alert. So if it's during the Snowtober, which I unfortunately was out of power for 4 days, you want to be able to have different messages to different folks. So operations, you want to activate them one way, and you have a separate communication to them. The community and your employees, whether it's your citizen constituents or employees, the masses, you have one message, and then also for the executive management and facility managers, et cetera. So if you think about this ahead of time and have these all prepared, it makes the execution of any kind of plan much more streamlined and simpler. From an Everbridge perspective, we enable you to actually look at weather alerts in the context of the Everbridge universe. So we get weather feeds that include over 100 different types of weather events that can occur. This is an example here of a blizzard warning. And note that you have a couple of options here. You can automatically notify your contacts based on the kind of weather event it is. So if it's going to be a blizzard warning, you might want to automatically send out something. Likewise, you can, before that event happens and you get that warning, you can select contacts interactively on the map at the time that you actually receive that alert about that weather event. So you have a lot of flexibility in leveraging how you want to notify your contacts based on these weather events. We talked earlier about confirming multiple contact paths, and this is all about targeting the individual, not the device, and the fact that some modes could be compromised during a variety of different kinds of events. So making sure that you gather this information from your constituents is as important as possible. And Ed touched upon that as well in his discussion in terms of how you want to manage those contact paths, etc. One of the key capabilities of Everbridge is not only the ability to reach out to your constituents with messages and notifications, but it's also to have two-way mobile communications during the event of some kind of a crisis. And the important thing here is that you can receive pictures and status information from people on the front line. So your employees and constituents are really, your source of frontline intelligence. And based on that, you can start to really, get a picture of what's occurring on the ground, even though you may not physically be present there. And you get a sense of who's safe, who isn't, et cetera. Social media. We're going to talk about social media because it serves really two purposes here. It really acts as an additional communication channel. So you see on the right-hand side here, the city of Boston is using social media to communicate with their constituents about power outages, et cetera. But it also enables you to understand what's happening on the ground to build much better situational intelligence and to get an understanding of where you may want to focus your emergency response. And it's important to know that social media can be used, again, through all phases of an event, whether it's during the preparation phase, during the actual event itself, and during the recovery. Here's an example of what's happening. This was actually during the recovery period of Hurricane Sandy. People were having trouble getting to work, and this was a particular problem with hospitals that were impacted in the Hurricane Sandy area because they couldn't get gas. And so understanding which gas stations were open, how long the lines were, all of that was being reported in real time on social media. And being able to have access to that helped people figure out ways to get around the whole gas issue and how to fight the lines, which gas stations were closing if you're heading to a gas station and it closes, et cetera. Communicating to your constituents around those issues is really critical. Likewise, after Hurricane Sandy, there was widespread damage, and you could see a lot of this being reported real time during the course of that recovery. Here's an example of, I left the house for the first time since Sandy hit. I'm finding some scary stuff. These are pictures that if you couldn't reach this area, you might want to know that, that these wires were down, et cetera. Likewise, here's another example of the winter storm. And again, snow, particularly in the Northeast, can drift and fall in a variety of ways, and locations can be really different. In a 10-mile zone, you could have 2 inches at one end and 20 at the other end. As I know, living in the Worcester area, which took the prize for the most snowfall last winter, even beating out Buffalo, which I'm not sure that's a prize we wanted to get, but and so we had drift like this, et cetera, and understanding where people might be stranded, where the power outages are. Social intelligence, again, is another way to paint the best picture possible, including other information that you're getting from your own frontline intelligence, et cetera. So those are just a few things I wanted to mention around managing disruptive events. Everbridge, as I said earlier, we've been in business for over 10 years now. We have over 1,500 customers covering, a variety of different verticals. We'd love to have the opportunity to speak with you on helping solve any problems you have and, establishing, better best practices and processes for your own organizations. So please feel free to reach out to us, and we will schedule time with you.
Great, thank you so much. So at this point, we are going to open it up to questions from our audience. As a reminder, you may submit questions by typing a question into the open text field in the questions panel on your screen and submitting it to all panelists. and we will answer as many questions as time allows. So our first question is for Ed. To maintain the accuracy of contact information for employees, do you send out regular reminders for them to update their information? And if you do, how often?
So there's two ways we get to them. That's a great question. The first is when we run either quarterly or semi-annual, I don't know what you call it, a drill or exercise, where we actually use the system just to check it out. We ask for a response. And if we don't get a response, we provide that information back to the group leaders, and they are basically tasked with just checking with their people, how come you didn't respond? They want to know, for good reason, because that means it won't work for them during a real event. And the other thing is it uncovers improper contact information. The other way we do it is twice a year we require folks to update their business continuity and disaster recovery plans. And when they do that, they have to go through their contact list and make sure that it's current. So it's pushed out, but it's sort of a federal system, where we set standards and we maintain the basics of the system. They're responsible for what goes into it. So we push that out to the folks. Hope that helps.
Great, thank you. Our next question, I think is probably applicable to both of you. Can you talk about the benefits of one-way communication or mass notification versus two-way communication?
Sure, I can answer that, and I think Ed probably has some comments as well. So mass communication is great in terms of communicating to large populations of people when you need to get a message out really quickly and concisely. Two-way communications is a complement to that, and it can be leveraged in two different ways. One is during a known crisis that's in progress, to receive information from constituents, whether it's citizens or employees, on what's happening on the ground. So you can, with the Everbridge system, you can establish that two-way communication, and also where that is coming from because it's all it's all geo-tracked. So you can understand, the status of various people, et cetera, and you can choose which populations you want to enable that two-way communication for. The second benefit of two-way communication is getting information in a situation where you don't know there's a problem. So, for example, if you're managing 100 different branch offices for a bank or a set of manufacturing facilities or or a state and local government agency, and there's a fire that you're not aware of, having a picture of that sent to you and so you can activate the appropriate resources is key. So there's really two ways that two-way communication is used: solicited information and then unsolicited information to get an understanding of something you might not be aware of.
Great, thank you so much. Go ahead,
We've
Ed.
we've actually used it in just that way. One of the things we'll do is call folks out for an assignment, and we want them to confirm that they got it. And that's it's just a polling question, but it's very simple and it's very easy. And we can sit and watch the dashboard, and within moments we know, 80% of our talent liaisons know that they're to report to their EOCs now. So they know it. We can relax on that and move on.
Great. And this next question is for Ed as well. What kind of ongoing planning do you undertake with community and regional organizations or jurisdictions, including critical communication planning?
It really came to a head after Tropical Storm Irene and the Snowtober events in 2011. But basically, we found a number of areas where we could improve the way we work with the state and so forth. And so one thing that we do is we participate in an annual exercise with the state. And it's a very robust exercise that's run by, in Connecticut anyway, the Department of Emergency Management, Homeland Security. And it involves us actually rolling utility trucks and sometimes cutting trees and doing those activities. And the intent is communications and coordination to learn, where we went from sort of informal relationships and networking. We went to formal procedures that describe, what each group's role is, and then we do the exercise to make sure that it's understood and practiced and everyone's familiar with it. And this involves us working closely with the National Guard, the Departments of Public Works, the town emergency management directors, and even the town officials, the first selectmen, mayors, and so forth, to coordinate all that. So it's a very rigorous process. It includes staffing from the utility in each of the town EOCs during a disaster, and then lots of practice and lessons learned during the year, even when there's nothing going on.
Great, thank you. And then perhaps a follow-up question to that is, how do you manage training with your internal employees?
The training internally, frankly, for the Everbridge system itself, it doesn't really require much, because anybody that's used a web browser is usually generally able to get on, and you can go mouse exploring mostly without causing too many problems. We try to point out where they might cause problems. But overall, we do a number of different training initiatives during the year, including for critical infrastructure. There's some requirements there for people that have access to bulk power system transmission, and we include some content there. But by and large, the Everbridge system, we do it on a one-off basis. So if someone's a new group, we'll go over it with them, and we've never found the need to do it again. It's been that easy.
Excellent, thank you. So this next question is for Claudia, and I'm sure she's expecting it because we get this question, I think it's the most frequently asked question on our webinars. Can you explain the 3-3-30 rule again?
I would be very happy to explain the 3-3-30 rule. So this is, very important during an emergency situation when you're, trying to direct people to take certain actions. And the rule is all around the fact that when you construct that notification, you want to have 3 ideas maximum, 3 sentences, and no more than 30 words. So that's where the 3-3-30 comes from. And we have, examples of best practices that, embody that 3-3-30 in our educational materials that's, available to all of our customers.
And
Perfect.
just if I can add, that actually comes from some academic studies that were done where they, they studied very closely the extent to which a message is effective when it's delivered in any of those modes, and it's right on the money. That's what it needs to be.
Fantastic, thank you. So this one is for Ed. How do you manage sending out messages in a timely fashion and keeping people informed versus waiting to make sure that you have all of the correct information?
My background is engineering, and so I call it a race condition. Anybody knows what a race condition is when you have 2 things that are supposed to happen in a certain sequence, but because of any number of reasons, conditions and so forth, they happen out of sequence. So with the world basically now at everybody's fingertips in terms of information, but not necessarily reliable information, you're always trying, as a utility, that you can't say anything that's not accurate, or you shouldn't anyway. But people are tweeting and posting on Facebook information that, it's outstripping your ability to keep up with it. It's a difficult challenge. We have people who specialize in social media, for example, and their job during a storm is to monitor social media and to see where the messaging is being effective and where it could be more effective and where we can help people understand better something that they're observing and they're not understanding. And so you get lots of that, lots of misinformation that occurs out in the field. And I think it's not just us. It's all the news outlets, for example, are constantly having to report on things that they can't confirm. And that's not where you want to be when you're a utility, because it's a little more, I don't want to say it's life and death, but it's a little more critical than coming back an hour later and saying, oops, when we told you such and such was happening, we were wrong. So in this case, we can monitor system conditions, we can get information to the extent possible, and that's what we use as our basis for facts. And then we watch social media to see if there's a way that we can help out in promulgating the correct information into the field. There's no desire to make things sound better than they are. That's just a bad path to go down during a storm or during an outage. And the last thing we want to do is, set incorrect expectations with folks.
Yeah, I think, Ed, you raise an excellent point in the sense that, social media can be used to gather information from the ground that's true, pictures that are being reported of, disastrous situations, et cetera. But it can also be used to understand where false rumors are propagating, where you may want to actually, correct those. So, for example, if someone is, falsely reporting that, power is out someplace where for a fact that it's not, being able to control that rumor is really important. And there's a whole variety of different ways in which rumors get started on social media that, it's really helpful to understand. That's why it's important to monitor it and to, get a pulse on what is happening from a social media perspective.
Oh, great example is during a storm, we'll see people talking to each other saying, they said that they're working on putting the power back up in my town, but I just drove around and I didn't see any of their trucks anywhere. So there's a number of reasons for that. You work out from a substation, which is the source of the power, out and fixing the wires as you go along the way. And if a town is at the end of a line or a section of town, and they may not even have a substation in their town, depending on the size of the town, you won't see anybody working there, at least not for a while. They're going to start at the beginning. Coming out to your street and putting the wires back up still won't bring your power back on if there's a break further down the line, so they have to work out. And the other piece of that is sometimes you'll see people what they call standing around. I saw the crews standing around in the parking lot at McDonald's or whatever, and they're not doing anything. Well, in fact, they may be awaiting switching. Switching is a safety-related activity that turns power on and off to various sections of the grid and the distribution system, and they can't work until they know certain points are de-energized, and then they have to go and ground it. It's a very complicated system, and they have to be careful. We did all these restorations in all those storms without any injuries, and that's without anybody getting hurt because there was a live wire or something, or because someone powered up a generator and backfed it into the system. So all that type of information is out there on social media, and watching it could actually be safety related. We actually have had instances where we've been able to provide guidance to folks because we saw that they didn't understand something. So it's very useful.
Great, thank you. So I think we have time for just one more question. I think probably this is directed at Claudia, but I'll invite Ed to answer as well. Particularly with weather events where bandwidth can be compromised, how do you handle messaging?
Yes, so that's an excellent question, because during Hurricane Sandy, as an example, landlines were down first, right? So again, you want to focus on multimodal communication so that for every contact you have as many paths as possible, and that includes SMS, cell phone, landlines, and also don't forget that we have a mobile messaging. Something like SMS is compromised, etc. So leveraging all of those is very important.
Excellent. And Ed, I don't know if there's anything you wanted to add.
That's exactly what we do. Is during a storm, we've got satellite phones, we've got every way that we can possibly, radio systems. We rely on some fiber-connected systems that go underground between emergency operations centers. There's any number of ways to communicate. Not everybody has what we have. We know that, and we don't have what everybody else has. And you have to try them all. And if you need to get a hold of somebody, we do it, and we tell them, once you got the message, acknowledge it, Once they acknowledge it, the system stops trying to call them. But until it gets a hold of them, it's fantastic because it's relentless. It'll just keep going at all the different methods they put in. So got to put them all in. You can't just rely on one.
Excellent. Thank you. And on that note, I am sorry to announce that we have run out of time. Thank you so much to Ed and Claudia for a fantastic session, and thank you to all of our attendees who were able to join us today. If you missed any part of the webinar, be sure to look for the slides on everbridge.com/blog. You'll also receive an email with a link to the recording of the session in the coming days. If you haven't already, please take a moment to follow us on Twitter at Everbridge and join our group on LinkedIn, Everbridge Incident Management and Emergency Notification Professionals. For those of you interested in requesting a demo of the Everbridge system, please visit everbridge.com/request-demo. And thank you all again, both speakers and attendees, for your participation in today's Expert Insights webinar. When the lights go out, managing communication during disruptive events. And we hope to see you all online again soon. Have a wonderful day.